Welcome to Desert Wanderers. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. Today we have a special host, Father Sintra. He will be doing his Generational Catholicism series. This plays on the third week of every month and will be a new segment for our show on Desert Wanderers. We're so excited to bring this to you. Let's jump right into it.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
O glorious Saint Joseph, model of all those who are devoted to labor, obtain for us the grace to work conscientiously, putting the call of duty above our natural inclinations, to work with gratitude and joy in a spirit of penance for the remission of our sins, considering it an honor to employ and develop by means of labor the gifts received from God, to work with order, peace, moderation, and patience, without ever shrinking from weariness and difficulties, to work above all with purity of intention and detachment from self, having always death before our eyes and the account that we must render of time lost, of talents wasted, of good omitted, of vain complacency and success, so fatal to the work of God. All for Jesus, all through Mary, all after thine example, O Patriarch Saint Joseph, such shall be our motto in life and in death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, have you guys heard anything from your friends or relatives from our first conversation? Did they give you any feedback? Did they say, "Oh, this is the worst thing I've ever listened to in my life. I'll never tune in ever again"?
Just thumbs up. They were excited about it. That's all. That's all we have. Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that I've heard is, and something that I want to address here off the bat is, so I've heard lots of good, positive feedback, but then also just some critical questions and a little bit of pushback, specifically in regards to homeschooling, because we did kind of, talk about that a lot, kind of incidentally. We hadn't planned to, and all of, you were homeschooled your children, and then you're helping homeschool your grandchildren now, and then all the three other couples who are in this project with us, they're currently homeschooling their children too. So It may seem, just from that data point, it may seem like, oh, we're trying to convince everyone that they should homeschool, or that everyone who doesn't.
Not everybody's. It just doesn't suit everyone.
Right.
Or the family dynamic. So
yeah. So maybe one day we'll do a full episode on schooling in general, and pros and cons, and how to adjust for this and that. So that, that's not the purpose here. What I just want to highlight here is the focus of our project isn't what type of schooling is best, or another category here could be to the liturgy. You mentioned that you grew up in the traditional Latin Mass. Heidi Flanagan mentioned that she grew up in the charismatic movement, and then the rest of us are kind of dispersed throughout, in different kind of flavors, so to speak. And that's an important conversation, to discuss those things. But that's also not our focus for our project. It's not what does the liturgy look like. It's not what type of schooling. Where do you go to school? What college? It's not any of those things. It's what happens at home. What happens at home? What is the relationships between the parents, husbands and wives, with each other, with God, and then with the children? And so I just wanted to highlight that. What happens at home? That's what we're digging into.
Great.
How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Well,
just answering one of your questions like that.
What's that?
I was just answering one of your questions in regards to those.
What do you mean?
Oh, just as far as, what is best. I would not say that homeschooling is best for everyone, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So with this focus of what happens at home, one theme that came out from you two was how hard you worked together as a family. So this culture of working hard and working together. And so I'd love to dig into that. Yeah. What did that? I'll just read here what I wrote to you, and then we'll unpack it as we go. But what did that look like? Feel free to provide details, schedules, routines, Did the kids misbehave? How did you handle that when that happened? How old were they when they started working?
Mhm.
And why is that not child labor? Are you breaking child labor laws by employing your
We
children
joked.
to do construction with you? Did they also have a lot of playtime? How much? What about sports? I know the answers to this, but
Yeah.
I look forward to unpacking it. What was sports like for them? And did that
Mhm.
interfere or did that contribute to the family life and to working hard as a family? So I don't expect you to, answer all of that at
Right.
once, but there it is.
Keep them in mind, though. Um, I would say, as far as the working hard, um, we usually had some kind of project going um, as a family unit, and sometimes it was a chore, sometimes it was building a barn, sometimes it was building a house, sometimes, just working on finishing something, um, cars, like cleaning up cars or whatever. But we would work as a team to get it done so that we could go on to the next and have fun. Usually there's always a list of things that we need to kind of chip away at. Um, and as far as the kiddos, it started from a very young age, as far as like just routinely picking up the toys when we were done with them. And I remember, being amazed that, they can balk at 15, even a year old, of 15 months, 18 months, and don't want to pick up the toys. They want to go on to the next thing or whatever. And so literally taking their hand, opening it up, putting their hand on the toy, closing their hand for them, putting in the box, the basket or whatever the toy was in. And, and the whole time I'm like, little willful things, like we all are. And gradually I'm like, okay, now you do it. And so usually, unless you could make it a game, and some kids are more amiable about things like that. They dig their heels in, usually around. Oh, I noticed even some kiddos getting stubborn around 10 months old. Sometimes you're like, oh, that's an attitude. I,
Mhm.
I see that. But yeah, so that's kind of where it's instilled. And then the more children you have, honestly, they watch the older ones. The younger ones watch the older ones, and they'll
Mhm.
still balk and not want to do what they're told or whatever. But when they see the other ones having fun or getting their work done, they're like, well, maybe we all just should go along with the program.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, oh, that. But like I said, as the kids got older and we'd have projects, or Ken would work with um, our son on something, it wasn't always separated boys and girls, because we had all these girls, 4 girls
Mhm.
and 1 boy. But
Mhm.
we would work on cleaning the house. Saturday morning was cleaning the house, except first Saturday we'd go to mass. And then Tuesday turned into a cleaning day, also after school, like in the afternoon, because we had other things scheduled on all the other days of the week, pretty much. So Tuesday just seemed to be naturally the day where we needed to get after the housework. Um, so we just taught them how to do their chores and what was their responsibilities and things like that from an early
Mhm.
age.
What about from you, Ken? What are some of your initial thoughts on all of that?
Your general question was about the work, I guess maybe a work ethic or something, and how that began. And I guess I have to go back to, and I know Teresa can probably attest to this. When she grew up, her dad owned a company, and she was there a lot. And I know my dad instilled that in me, and almost to a fault, the work ethic. And at the time, I remember I was 8 years old. I was going to a construction site, and I was expected to do things, and I generally didn't like it at the time, but I learned a lot of skill. I learned a lot of skills. And I think that when we started having children and we were trying to better our situation, um, as they were growing up, and so the building thing came natural, and I think we expected a lot from the kids, and the bar was set pretty high, but they were able to do it. If you set the bar high, they're able to do it. We didn't treat the children really a lot like children. We had expectations, and we communicated with them like, not that they were equal, but we treated them like human beings, and they actually can rise to the occasion. So we did have fun, we did have challenges, but I think that generally, as far as your question about the work ethic, I think it was always there. It was instilled from a very early age, and and I think all of our kids now are exceptional workers, sometimes probably to a fault. Probably a negative thing, but they're very dependable, and they're overly loyal to things. And but anyway, to answer your question, I think that was it. It was just a part of life, just like the mass was a part of life at an early age. It's just no argument or anything. It was what it was. So anyway,
I have a few things that I want to dig into there, but first maybe I want to just balance the focus on high expectation with also a focus on high affection, right? Because I know you guys fairly well, and I know that you have a very high level of affection for really for everyone, but maybe especially for your children. And so I'm sure that as you were raising your children, you're setting this high bar of expectation that you saw them rise to, but that was coupled with, and I'd love for you to speak to this, coupled with high affection. Because where I'm coming from here is I think that I learned in seminary that, actually, I think I may have learned this from the Flanagans, but it was while doing a class in seminary, and I interviewed you two, and I also interviewed them for a class project. But in any case, they said that if you have high affection and high expectation, that's the right formula, and that produces relationship and holiness. But then if you have high expectation but low affection, that produces resentment.
It would naturally.
Yeah. And then if you have low affection and low expectation, then that's deflating, that produces mediocrity or complacency. Or if you have high affection and low expectation, then that smothers the child and spoils them. And so as we're exalting this virtue, we can call it, of high expectation, and this is really kind of the focus of this episode, maybe we should right off the bat also balance that with high affection. So can you talk about that? What did high affection look like for you with your children?
I think we did definitely hug, and always, bless the children as they went to bed, and hug them, and goof around with them, joke, have some treats here and there, that they could look forward to. But we did a lot of things together. We would go for hikes together, maybe out to dinner once in a while, or have a pizza night or a movie night, or we always had prayers in the evening and in morning to start our day with school. But I think affection, just besides telling them they're doing a great job, or, trying to, maybe critique a little bit, but say, let's do it this way. And do you understand? And I think they knew that we did everything for the family, for them, for all of us. It wasn't just like doing it for mom and dad. It was and then when they saw their work done, that was a huge boost of confidence and a sense of accomplishment, like seeing the finished product. So I think kind of cheerleaders, or
I think we used to always say we work hard and we play hard.
Hmm.
So we expect a lot on the work, but the play was also very important. And we played together and we played hard, meaning we had great experiences as a family, outdoor experiences. And I think along the other thing, having literal affection as far as hugging and complimenting that. I think being involved in their business, and I think always asking them, or the dinner table is a great place for them. Ask them how their day's going, or they do like Jen and Cam do now. They have a pickle and a what is it? A pickle and a peach or whatever, where every child gets a chance to say what's the challenge they had that day, and what was the great thing they had that day. So I think that communication of being in their daily activities and in their business showed that you're generally interested in their upbringing. But I always go back to we would always tell them we're going to work really hard, but we're going to play really hard together when we're done. And I think they really enjoyed those kinds of adventures. And it built a camaraderie, a team aspect of what we were doing as a family. So pray hard, work hard, the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that anecdote of the dinner table. Of really asking them and being interested in them and wanting to hear from them what their day was like, what their struggles were like. That big theme of delighting, right? Delighting in the children, and that gets, that can be lived out throughout the day. But this sense of yes, I'm here to teach you. I'm your parent, but I'm also wanting to learn from you. I'm wanting to receive your heart. And I think, yeah, children who are growing up with that, they know, like Catherine mentioned, they're known and they're seen, and then that provides kind of the foundation for them to strive and to rise to the occasion and to seek to meet those high expectations that you're setting for them. That is also crucial. Yeah, I don't know if you remember this. We've talked about this before, but I remember vividly. You weren't there, Ken. You were working for I think it was the Sunday before Memorial Day, but the first day that I met Teresa and Kenny and Emily and Jojo. So I didn't meet Genevieve and Maddie until later. But it was my first Sunday at St. Thomas, and Father Mariusz announced that we had a seminarian for the summer, and he'll be in the back. And he had already put a sign-up sheet in the back of the church for people to sign up to have the seminarian over at their house for dinner. And so I'm in the back greeting people, and Teresa and Kenny and Emily and Jojo come out, and Jojo must have been maybe 14 years old at this time. And so, and Emily not much older, right? Maybe 16 or 17, and Kenny 19, 20. You guys probably know the precise ages, but in that range. So they're like teenagers and young adults, so it's not like they were just, fully developed and fully mature, although they were much more mature at 14 than I was at 30. But they, anyways, you guys came up and you were all just very attentive to what I was saying, all of you. And this is so rare. Unfortunately, I mean, teenagers are so distracted today, and they have a hard time making eye-to-eye contact and listening and asking questions. Like that's so rare. And we could probably do a whole episode on that. But it was so clear that they were all very engaged with me. They wanted to hear from me. They wanted to learn from me. They wanted to meet me and know me and find out who I was. And my point in bringing this up is like that didn't just happen accidentally, and I don't think that's even something that can be taught with words, right? They learned that because they received that from you. I guess that's my hypothesis, is they received that from you, that you were attentive to them, you cared for them, you learned from them, you listened to them, and then now they grew up in this environment of being known and seen, and so now they're seeking to know and to see others. Does that resonate? What do you think about that?
That's
Can
wonderful.
you say that again? Sorry.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example, what you said. Yeah, that's really neat. And I think it's so funny, and maybe we were overly conscious, and not to bring up the homeschooling thing, but in the day, homeschooling was not a thing. And I know that, my family was really pushed back on that. How are these kids going to be socialized? And that's part of the socialization too. And that, but we were speaking with our children like they were human beings, and we were expecting them to speak to others the same way. And it was all part of the training and upbringing. So they were very socialized in dealing with adults and communicating with adults. Yeah, but that's a great story that you tell. That's fun. I haven't heard that.
Well, good. And so, so let's get in, or dig into, or just go back to the work. So in this environment of high affection and high expectations, you're working hard. Well, first of all, so you're building a house together. Let's put a concrete example. Concrete, no pun intended. And you're building a house, and how old are the kids, and when they're working, helping build this house, and what exactly are they doing?
The first home we built, Emily was a wee baby. It was a year after she was born, and she was our preemie. So,
and she's the third, right? So you had two
fourth.
other.
She's the fourth. So we had three.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So Genevieve, Madeline, and Kenny. And so that would have put everybody around 3, 5, and 7 years old.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And, I would make a lunch, put it in the cooler every day during the summer. This was, we weren't schooling at that time while we were building that house. And I'd make, the snacks and the cooler and the drinks, and they'd bring some toys, and they were little dirt plots because it was nice farming, good black dirt. So they had showers or baths every night. So they would play or work or do whatever, play together or keep an eye on each other. Or I remember one scene where we were kind of finishing up, and I was pulling electrical wire through the studs, and we had a playpen set up for the baby in the corner, and I looked in the playpen, and I was like, "Where's the baby?" And I was carrying her on my back, but I had been working for so long she was napping. I didn't realize. I was panicking. Where's the baby? She's with me. So everything was good.
That was kind of an age that they were doing work that was age appropriate.
Yes, for sure.
They were little, but it would be picking up mail. And then my dad actually came up here and helped us build that house too. So it was like a 2.5 generation house built there.
Right.
But the next house that we did when the kids are more like 12, 10, 8. They were hammering nails. They were dragging 2x4s to us faster than we could nail them together. And it did look like a really funny scene. The neighbors probably thought it was crazy. This family up there, all these new kids are framing this house. But most of it was age appropriate, but there's always something to do. And again, it was work hard, but we would, take the day off in the lake or whatever. So there was always a fun thing afterward. But they learned from an early age it was a way of life. So.
Yeah. And did they always obey? I mean, I can hear parents thinking, I can't even get my kids to clean their room. You know what?
Yeah, but I think it started so early, and I think we always had fun doing it. I mean, even though it was maybe a grind for us because we were, stressed and working hard and, like maintaining a job and doing this on the side, it was stressful for us. But it's almost, it was almost not a game, but it can be fun. There's a way to make things fun. And we weren't, we weren't pushing on them really hard, but it seemed like we all just did it together. And I think there were times when they maybe, got tired or didn't want to do it or needed a break. And it wasn't, we weren't treating them like they had to work this mandatory 60-hour a week. But
or else they don't get their pension.
But they had fun doing stuff, and there was a lot of playing involved.
Oh, and music. We always had music going.
Yeah,
Oh, really? Okay.
always ended up being a fun thing. So
Uh-huh.
But as
So
far
you
as
think, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, as far as teaching them to do their drawers, they did not keep their room perfect, and a lot of them stuffed their drawers with things and or under the bed and put and candy wrappers, on the side of the bed.
Uh-huh.
yeah, there's a lot of
There's
but there was always some kind of
I'm like, start up. Here you go. You're taking longer. It's going to take you
Uh-huh.
to do it right. So just start from the beginning. So
it wasn't always pretty, and there were times where there was pushback. As they got older, they're testing their boundaries and limits. We think just the communication and being reasonable, and having reasonable expectations. And again, going back to the how did you say it again, Father? You had high expectations, but what was
Affection.
affection? Yeah.
Mhm.
I think they knew that. They knew we cared about them. We were doing everything we could to better our circumstance. And they felt that they were part of the team. So they had an impact on our team. And so I think the sports analogy was important to us at the time to rally everybody together.
Yeah, Kenny mentioned on that it's like he took on the name Dodge would do these things together, and then that also translated to him taking on this name of Catholic, and it's important. I work hard for this name, for this family, for this team, and now for this church, and it's important. I work hard, and I'm learning these. I learned these things at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And what about misbehaving? And yeah, can you go deeper into that? So if they are not doing what you're asking them to do, what strategies did you use? But then also, what was it like for you internally? Like, did you ever lose your patience? Did you ever, yell at them out of wrath? I guess the broad question here is, how did you manage the internal balance between disciplining, which is important, and not falling into sin yourselves?
for sure. Yeah. One thing that someone told me or I read in a book along with schooling was, are you the teacher when you look in the mirror? Are you the person that you want your children to be exposed to and to teach your children? Are you there? So that always resonated with me. What do I need to change about myself or become more organized in my own interior? To portray what they need, and each child needs something different at any given moment, and to try to be that for them. I know I can't be everything for them for certain, and they learn that, and saying you're sorry, asking for forgiveness from your children. The first time's kind of hard because you're like, well, probably deserved that, but at the same time, it wasn't, I could have done better as a mom. So those kind of situations, it starts, of course, you don't get a 13-year-old right out of the womb, thank God. So they're so sweet and cute when they're little. But it's an evolving thing, and it's appreciating each child as an individual, how God made them, but also seeing their strengths and weaknesses and how you can help build them up, and help them with their weaknesses. Because one thing that always stuck with and motivated me as a parent to stick with it and be stubborn enough to help them curb some of their weaknesses, is to explain to them that we have to change that now, because if that tendency was left on its own accord, it could really be a problem in their later life. So trying to explain that, like almost with a visualization, like, where do you think this kind of behavior is going to lead us? Where if I let you, eat candy, the rest of this is great for first year or first graders, eat candy for forever. Like you don't ever have to eat good food. Just eat candy and you could stay up all night for as long as you want, like forever. And of course, obviously they're gonna go, yeah, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna have a stomach ache. And you don't have to, you can have juice and candy only, soda pops. Just so you do these, big shifts. And they're like, yeah. So there's like a moderation thing. We can have treats at times, but we also need to eat healthy. Our body naturally needs that and how God made us. That was always a good one for little kids.
I think when Teresa said it was evolving, I think that a couple of the things, and I think I learned this from, or at least I did from my dad, and that he always told me that disciplining children is being consistent, is being fair, and having follow through with it. So even as a child is 18 months old, they're learning their discipline for the first time, whether something is hot or whether they can't touch it. And there's a consequence for them doing that, and it's reasonable and it's fair and it happens immediately. And there isn't a lot of negotiating going on. You just have a fair punishment until they learn that they can't touch that thing. Otherwise, they won't be able to get something, or they won't be able to do something or play with something that, will affect them. And I think from the very beginning, if the kids are doing that at 18 months, by the time they're 4, I mean, how many times have they been disciplined until they're 4? So again, as you go up to an age appropriate thing, when a 12 or 13-year-old back talks, then you deal with it immediately, fairly, and the consequences are clear and concise, and they've already been disciplined a million times by the time they get to that age. So it seems like when we look around now, when I look at parents who are disciplining it doesn't seem like they are in charge of their 2-year-old. The 2-year-old seems to have command over the parent, and you don't have to be mean to do it. They just know from the very beginning that is the parent. The parent is in charge, and they have to have the follow through. And the follow through is a difficult thing. If you say that you're not going to get to do this certain activity because you failed to do this expectation, it's difficult because you want your child to do that. And it's difficult to say you can't. But I think we learned early on that those things are very trivial in the big scheme of things. But if you enforce those things early on, then they know later on when you say that either this needs to be done or this you need to act a certain way, then they will do that just because it's been ingrained in them from the very beginning. So I think that consistency and fairness, not heavy-handed, fairness, appropriate. I think that was it. And Teresa had to do that a million times with the little kids when they're there. And when you talk about falling into sin or being a little maybe overly yelling, whatever. So I was doing the police work. Okay. So I was at police work and all day long in dealing with kids that are bad or bad situations, seeing the human species in a terrible light. And I would come home and then have to deal with, a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or who's out of control. And sometimes you can lose your patience with that. So, not that I was ever abusive, but there were times when I could lose my cool there because I was a policeman and I was a control freak and everybody's supposed to listen to me. And the problem is when you go home, sometimes that doesn't happen. So I think it was a good learning for all of us in that. But I think really starting from the very beginning of the parent-child relationship and knowing that, hey, mom is in charge. And if you don't do these things that are expected of you, then there are consequences. And I think when they learn that from 18 months old, I think it's just a natural thing.
Yeah. The image that John gave us, actually, it might have been on one of the times that you guys not accidentally jumped off the call because you didn't want to receive praise from them. But John talked about the image of the father being like the fence around the perimeter. and to be firm, to be constant, to be there, and what that fence does is it provides the freedom for the children to explore the whole territory within the fence boundaries, right? Whereas if the fence is not there, the children actually either stay in the center and don't explore the territory that's appropriate, or they go too far out, right, and wander into the chaotic, unknown world. And so, and all of the dangers that accompany that. And so, for the father to be that strong fence, and coupled with the mother being the heart of the household, and if those two things are in place, it seems like that that's a really good recipe. And I mean, maybe there's a danger of exaggerating the distinction too far, right? Because the mother also serves as the fence, and the father also serves as the heart. But there does seem to be, just due to various factors of biology, of psychology, of everything else, that the father's primary role out of those two options is to be the fence, and the mother's primary role is to be the heart, and they're complementary in that way. And with the thing about recognizing one's own kind of interiority during these difficult moments, I have a quote here from St. John Bosco. He worked with foster children, foster boys, who were very unruly and who did not have high affection. They didn't have parents at all, and so forth. And so, usually a worse situation than many parents find themselves in. But he was very, very strict on both of these areas. Like, both, we have to be high in affection and high in expectation, and we have to be high in vigilance towards ourselves. And here's one. There's a long letter from him, but where's that quote that I had? He says, okay, here it is. My sons, so he's talking to the priests in his order. In my long experience, very often I had to be convinced of this great truth. It is easier to become angry than to restrain oneself, and to threaten a boy than to persuade him. Right? So you gave great examples of persuading, yes, setting the fence, but not as a threat, but I'm going to persuade you to see that this is actually what's best for you. Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, it is more fitting to be persistent in punishing our own impatience and pride than to correct the boys. It is more fitting to be persistent in punishing our own impatience and pride than to correct the boys. So it's almost like he's saying, raising of children, in his case, raising of these foster boys, but we can say for parents raising children, it's first of all about their own sanctification. And if the children, even the unruly children, and even the more unruly, the more this is the case, that the parents have an opportunity to be growing in holiness themselves. And it is more fitting to be persistent in punishing one's own impatience and pride. So that's the primacy, is to make sure I'm growing in holiness through these challenges, than to correct the boys. And then he says, we must be firm but kind and be patient with them. And he says other things, about how to correct and how to discipline and all these things. So it's not to say that that's not important, but just to put the priority where it belongs, that it's first of all about our own sanctification, our own growth in holiness, our own correction of ourselves and growing in patience and in humility and so forth. And it's from this place that then we can go, and especially parents, that you can go and raise your children. And now your children want to follow you, want to listen to you, because they see that you're on the path to holiness, to whatever degree they can grasp that in various stages of development, but they see that you're on this path to holiness, and now they're going to want to follow you on that same path. I kind of went on unspooling that more than I originally intended when I first started reflecting back, and I added a whole different topic here. But how does that resonate with you guys?
I think another thing that it brought up was, don't think that the child is doing this to offend you, or you just don't take it personally. When a 3-year-old is throwing a fit, you just give them the tools to learn to, deal with consequences or disappointments in life, and they have to figure it out. Now, if they're going to be hideous in the middle of a situation or at church or whatever, and you have to take them out of the room and let them work through their stuff. But at 3-year-olds, they can't really hear when they're throwing that fit. You can whisper. Actually, whispering works really good. Whispering to their ear and say, "You don't need that. When after mass, we can, have some fun or go for a walk or play at the park or things like that. But right now, this time is for Jesus." So just different things like that, with just not taking it personally is a big one as a parent. And then looking into yourself, just like he said, what do I need to change? How do I need to reach that child in these moments? And again, they're all so different, and they're evolving, and their little things change along the way. And you're like, oh, I remember thinking, oh, this stage is going to kill me, like this. And then sure enough, when it would just get to the height where you're like, oh, it would change to another one, or somebody else would be into another stage or whatever. So that's fun.
And I think too, going back to, again, I keep doing the sports analogy just because that's what spoke to me as a kid. And it's easy for me to reflect on coaches that I had and maybe difficulties I had in my family when I was a child. There were particular coaches that were really good. And I think they were displaying the same thing that a parent does. They had a high expectation and the affection too, in that the parent is almost like a coach, that every kid, like Teresa says, and every kid is so different, and everyone has God has given them different challenges and different personalities, and it's our job as the coach to motivate these kids, each of them in a different way. Some of them might need their shoulders rubbed, and some of them might need a little more aggressive ways of making them be inspired. But everyone's different, and trying to recognize that, because you don't want to crush the kid, you don't want to demean them or whatever. But every child was so different. Some you have to speak gentle to, and other ones are a little thicker head like I was, and just needed a little more reinforcing of how best to do it. So when I was looking at that, and then and reflecting on that quote that you were just reading, the John Bosco quote, and looking at yourself and saying, well, how am I not being the appropriate role model, or how are we not able to motivate this particular child or other, because everyone is different. Everybody has easier children to raise, but there's always one or two that really push back. But I think it's our job to try to do, and that is interesting, that makes me reflect on that, because you're looking at yourself first of all and say, how am I not doing it, or how are we not doing it? What are we doing wrong to not motivate this kid? So and it's a constant learning. It's a constant learning thing, and the communication with them. So anyway.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's turn the corner towards sports. So so they played sports, and they played golf, and at what age did they start, and other sports, and why? What was your thinking there? Obviously, I mean, surely maybe there's always, the possibility of somebody that could go up and become a professional athlete, but for 99.9999% of people who play sports, that's not the case. And so why did you think that it would be good for them to play sports? And how did you balance that with the family life and working on these projects and just school and family time and prayer time and all of that? How did you not allow sports, if this is true, if you did this, but how did you not allow sports to get in the way of those things? Because that's something we see a lot with families, sports kind of dominating the life of the family. And so lots
I
of
think
questions
we
there.
were, yeah, but I think we were pretty blessed in the time that we raised our children, because I look at it now. In fact, when I was growing up, I played multiple sports, and I was an overly, sports were probably the biggest part of my life, because I had no faith growing up with my parents. It's kind of a faithless household. But I think when we were raising our children, it wasn't expected to be a year-round thing. There was a little more just even worldly balance in how kids were going to play. But it was never, our faith was always in the forefront, and really Sundays were off limits, and we did not, but most of the sports weren't on Sunday then. And now with the traveling teams and things like that, I think it's much more difficult. Our children fell into playing golf, and they all played. We did it together. So again, we showed up at a golf course with all 5 kids, and they all played golf. And the older kids were out playing, and then JoJo was playing, and so we were running around the golf course as they're playing. And golf was a great sport for us then, because it taught a lot of life issues, and it taught a lot of independence. And they were out there by themselves and having to follow rules and having sportsmanship. And there was a lot to talk about and a lot to reflect on, a lot of life issues that we were able to do. But we traveled a lot as a family. We always went to mass, but we traveled a lot. So again, we played hard together, and it was their job. It paid for a lot of the kids' college. They all, they played sports in college, but I think it was a balanced thing. And it was kind of a means to an end in being able to go as far as they could, but they did get some rewards and some accomplishments out of that. But then it just kind of, now they go out, they all still play golf together, which was great. Kenny did play some other sports, but there was definitely a balance there. We never really chased everyone in all different directions all the time. And you have to, a 5-year-old kid or an 8-year-old kid, you have to put it in perspective. You're right. You're not going to go to the pros. You don't need a pitching coach and a hitting coach. You don't need to play year round. Just put it in balance and have fun. Obviously, the older you get, the more important it becomes to them. But I think, having that overall importance of their faith and being a member of the family, and, maintaining your all of your obligations to everyone on top of that. So there were sometimes sports were taken away, which was a painful thing for them, but they learned the valuable lesson of making sure all of their stuff in their personal life was handled before they got to do it. It was an extracurricular thing. So, but we did take it serious at the time, and they learned a lot of valuable lessons and disappointments and how to bounce back from that. So there were a lot of positive things and a lot of conversations to be had about life issues in going through a weekend of athletics. There was a lot.
Yeah, managing disappointments, taking care of themselves physically, emotionally, spiritually. We always said it was a nice walk. Go have a good walk, and that meant with God. And we bless them as they go, bless them and like that on their bed.
We always said, you are representing. You are representing, right? You are representing. You're representing.
Right, out on the golf course.
You're representing our Lord. People know who you are. They know what you believe, so you have to represent that. You're representing our Lord. You're representing your family. You're representing yourself. And your dignity. So there's a lot of things to learn at a very young age, which I think applies later on, is applicable later on when things get really difficult.
And we started them all, about, I want to say around 4, maybe some of them a little earlier. Like the girls did ballet. And the reason I started children in sports or dance or whatever was to expose them to take direction from other adults and be in a group setting. I thought that was important, especially being homeschooled. at first we only had 2, 3 children, and it was good for them to be around their peers and be expected to socialize and do all those things that are perfectly developmentally appropriate at those ages, to start being exposed to that. So yeah. And then we coached soccer and or softball and just different things that we just wanted them to be well-rounded, and mostly to, build character and stamina and just a healthy way of life and have fun.
Do you two play golf yourselves?
I didn't until the kids did, and I'm the worst in the family.
Yeah.
I'm good at peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
We all kind of played. They most of them became better than us because they had time to play. We didn't have time.
Uh-huh.
Right.
But it was an interesting, we couldn't
Mhm.
we couldn't afford to have them. We weren't members of a club or anything. They worked for their golf. They all played. I mean, when Jenna was 15, she wanted a job, and so we said, okay, well, you walk in there and represent yourself. And she spoke to the pro there, and they hired her, and so all of the kids worked their way toward through the starting as a cart kid and washing carts. So their benefit was they got to play golf for free there. So they were
That's awesome.
They went into the
Yeah.
so they learned early on about the work and play.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about, I'm not really sure how to paint this picture, but it seems that there is a difference between, and this actually relates to the homeschooling thing too. A difference between, so let's say neither of you know anything about golf. Well, let's just use golf as the example, just to kind of try to hone in on this. But it's like, I'm you saying this, you having this perspective. I'm the one who's raising my children. I'm going to use golf to do that. And I know golf, so I'm going to teach them golf. And I'm going to help them through the struggles. I'm going to be with them. I'm going to have both high affection and high expectation when it comes to golf. And I'm going to bring in other people to help. So other coaches to help, other, the manager of the golf course who can employ you. I'm going to bring him or her to help. And I'm going to use other resources. It's not like our family exists in isolation from the rest of the world. We're going to bring in other people into this process, but I'm still assuming autonomy or authority or primacy when it comes to raising my children, as opposed to I'm going to, and just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that everybody who doesn't homeschool has this perspective, but as opposed to, I'm going to drop my kids off at school. I'm going to drop my kids off at church. I'm going to drop my kids off at golf practice, at soccer practice, at softball practice, et cetera, et cetera. And you guys raise my kids. I'll be at home, I'll work, and I'll pay for all these things, but I'm really paying you, all of you, to raise my kids for me. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to describe there?
It would be. I think the world kind of tells us that's okay, and I understand that. I think children see through the time spent, the time invested in them by actual time together.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely do it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I know plenty of families that have gone to school, but they have to make a conscious effort when the day is done and everyone's tired, to spend time together, to read the scripture, to pray, to have a meal together. And honestly, I think where it goes wrong is there's not enough hours in the day and everybody's exhausted because they're going so hard. And parents are exhausted because they're working and they've given all they can to their work, but everybody's getting the leftovers at the end of the day, in most situations and it's really hard. I mean, happens in homeschooling too. I mean, there's seasons in life, right, that you don't have a lot to give at the end of the day because you're just tapped out.
So our kids did play in high school, or even play here. So most of their high school career was spent going to the course and playing with the coach, or being coached and playing with them. So we did not have hands-on with them all the time. But again, what Teresa said is the importance of the time when they do get home or when they are done, or the weekends. And again, going back and like Catherine said, being seen and heard. It's like, I am in your business. We are in your business. So they know whether they like it or not at the time that we care for them and we care for what they're doing and their involvement. And there's always conversation to be had. So again, that dinner table is so important. I can't think of a time that we didn't have a dinner table, regardless of what that looked like at the moment, whether we're building houses or whatever. And if we have to sit on a curb at some place or sitting in a lawn chair someplace because you don't have you're sitting together, learning about each other and reaffirming each other in their place in life, and you have a support group with you all the time. So I think they all felt that and felt the involvement. So you can do it if you're sending your child to school and they're gone at sports. You can do it, but it does have to be very intentional.
That's probably, the daily dinner is probably another, and yeah, that could be a category in itself. But, last time we talked a lot about how indispensable Sunday Mass is. It's almost like the daily dinner should be, a very close second. It's like Sunday Mass is indispensable. Family dinner every day is indispensable. Of course, there may be an exception here and there, but that's not the point. The point is like these two things are the rock bed of the life of the family. And so you mentioned, Teresa, the book called A Mother's Rule of Life. Can you give and that's something that Lindsay had mentioned before too. So can you give a synopsis of that and how did it help you?
I highly recommend it, especially for, any age, honestly. When you're struggling with keeping a schedule and the more babies are coming along and more demands, what have you, is it's really putting in place a schedule, and that's your rule of life. Because overall is the rule, and what you want to obtain in your spiritual life and for your family as a wife and a mother. You can put it in any, a single person could read it and get similar skills from it, but mainly it's, literally like sometimes on a 15-minute basis, what I'm going to be doing. It sounds a little over the top, and then you kind of tweak it, and it's always certain things don't move, are immovable, but others can shift because it's dynamic. Like life is dynamic. The child, you get the flu and the family or whatever, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, we're going to pray. It's 8:00. I can hear the alarm going off. I'm going to pray, but I'm cleaning up, sheets and towels and such, instead of being on my knees, in the classroom ready to go. But it's a great read. It starts off as a mom with, I think she was around 5 children deep, and just feeling like she's pulling her hair out, and that's perfectly normal. not being able to do all the things and be everything to everyone. So there's a process, there's a maturing that has to happen. And I just think that book can speak to so many people in their different places, whether they're young moms or they might not get it quite as much, a young mom, but as they have a few more children, they'll get it. You know, if you're trying to implement prayer time before the children get up, you know, but you're exhausted because you've been nursing a baby all night, all those good things. So it's amazing the stamina when you embrace your vocation, embrace the cross, how the stamina can build. But you still need to take care of yourself. I would say I didn't always do that. So I would let myself go as far as not get enough sleep a lot of times. So then my health would fall a little bit. So I try to encourage other people to, you know, get the sleep that you need and take care of yourself so you can give to your children and husband.
Yeah, we can't burn out, right? And I think we all have that tendency because we have lots of good ideas, lots of projects, lots of things, and we want to give ourselves to others. But there's a reason why Jesus says, you know, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. If we're not loving ourselves, so to speak, if we're not taking care of ourselves, and taking care of our relationship with God, prioritizing that and doing those things, if we're not doing that, then we won't be able to love others for very long. That's gonna burn out. It's gonna run out. But so this book helps you say to, or helped, or maybe continues to help you to kind of organize all of that, to put all of that in its proper order. And maybe you didn't do it perfectly, none of us do, but it fostered that so that not a single thing took too much time or it became too chaotic.
Right. Or there's just every moment was lived for God. That's the goal, right? So there's not a lot of just wasted time.
Yeah.
But you turn that into a prayer, even when you're resting, you can say prayers in your heart and mind.
Yeah.
Lifting your heart to God during the day.
Yes.
No one knows you're praying. But
sure. No, I'm glad you said that. So it's not like I'm going to organize my life so that I can have my hour of prayer, my hour with God, and then I can go do the rest of the things that I need to do. No, it's I'm going to organize my life so that all of my life can be a prayer to God. That's beautiful. Awesome. Thank you.
The other book, Father, I wanted to tell you about is The Temperament God Gave You. I think we've talked about it before, but that's a great read for parents and spouses, and talking about the different temperaments that Thomas Aquinas made us realize anyway. And then the combinations and just celebrating and loving what God has done in each person, and then finding out what motivates them in their temperament. That was a huge tool, especially coming up on teenagers, because I was like, where do we go from here?
Yeah, that will probably be we'll probably need to make that an episode on its own, like the differences between children, because that's something I've heard a few times too. It's like, to realize that there's no template that works for everyone, and there isn't a single cookie cutter that fits every child. And so it's not about, and this fits with our whole project, right? It's not about let's find out the perfect formula and then we'll just do it exactly, and then all the kids will grow up Catholic. No, it's not that, right? It's like it's learning how to love. It's learning to be loved, and then learning how to love each individual.
Yeah, and I think when I do talk to other young moms and dads, I usually try to let them know that you take things with a grain of salt, and you take what can work for your family. And if it doesn't work for your family, then you have to find something else. But each family is unique.
What about you, Ken? Are there any books that made an impact on you, or any specific resources that really helped you in your fatherhood?
I keep going back to the imitation of Christ because it's like these little nuggets that you can open it up and it seems like it's appropriate for whenever it's something for, for me to help strengthen myself. And then on the parenting side, because it seems like our parenting seems to never be ending now because so parenting will never end. Which is great. But Dr. Ray Garundi, You're a Better Parent Than You Think, is great because it's very simple and it's very common sense and just huge into common sense. Just say it out loud. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to be a psychologist. You just have to be very simple. I think that motivated you too because it reaffirmed what you're doing. So I think that, and I think really the best thing that I started doing is, this sounds really strange, but when I retired, in the morning, I wake up really early in the morning and I go get a cup of coffee and I sit in the dark, back to bed, and I sit in the dark, and that's my time to try to listen to God. And that 45 minutes of just closing my eyes and just trying to listen has been a peaceful thing to me. Or when I go on a walk and I say the rosary on my walk, those two things. But sometimes there's always so much noise in our life and in the world. Just that hour of I'm in the dark and listening is a wonderful thing, and it helps feed me.
And you do that for 45 minutes every morning,
every morning. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
I stare at my eyelids and I drink my coffee and I try to listen.
That's wonderful.
Try to listen. Yeah.
Have you done that your whole life, or did that start more recently?
No, I think
when you retired.
I think that particular habit, but definitely the quiet time. I have always needed quiet time, and it's funny because even when I'm in a police car, there was a lot of time that there was quiet time where I could just sit there and just try to listen. It's like there's no time to listen now because God's sometimes not screaming at you. He's trying to talk to you quietly in quiet moments, but we're so busy all the time. There isn't time to hear him or feel him in guiding you. And when you're expected to try to make decisions or guide people, it seems like you need that whatever little bit of assurance, and I mean, sometimes it's I don't know. That's developed into a habit over many years, I guess.
Beautiful. I am totally convinced of this and convicted, and I mean, I'll say it, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. You can disagree with me, and that's fine. I just won't listen to you, and I'll say that you're wrong. But I'm totally convicted that the foundation is one's own relationship with God. If I'm not growing in my relationship with God, if parents are not growing in their own relationship with God, they're not going to be able to parent their kids well. They're not going to be able to raise their kids in the way that the kids are going to want to have a relationship with God and choose Catholicism themselves. And same thing for me as a priest. If I'm not doing that myself, my parishioners are not going to receive anything that I want to give them. And this is like, it seems to be the most, it's both the most obvious and the most, the hardest thing to hear and to receive and to incorporate. Like the thing towards which we have the most amount of defensiveness towards. I think I didn't say that correctly. But I have lots of defenses in me that prevent me from hearing and incorporating into my life that my most important task is to develop a relationship with God. I can come up with 100 excuses every day, 100 justifications, 100 reasons of doubt, of insecurity, of fear that prevent me from really living that out. And if that's the case, and when I recognize in the areas that I recognize that it's the case, then the thing to do is to address it, is to like go into it, is to invite the Lord into it, is to reveal it to Him, is to expose it to Him, is to say to Him, here's what it is. Here's my fear. Here's my doubt. Here's my insecurity. Here's my wound. Here is the thing that's preventing me from prioritizing my relationship with you. And the more that I do this, the more that I'll be able to, help others and love others, especially those under my care. But I've been kind of beating this drum for I'm a year and a half. I've only been a priest for a year and a half, and it's hard. Like parents really reject that, or not reject it, but have a lot of defenses against that. Which I want to say two things. One is I want to say to the parents, let's look at those defenses together. But most importantly, it comes back to me. It's like, wait a second. If they're not receiving it from me, then I need to go into that with the Lord myself. Like, what is that causing in me when I get rejected, when my message gets rejected, or what have you? It's like, okay, let's bring back to the Lord so that the Lord can heal me and love me in that area. But I'm just so inspired that you start your day with that every single day, and that you pray a rosary every day, and that the lady is there with you.
I will say, Father, and I agree with that, but it's obviously easier for me because I'm much older, and there's a time, and there's 20 years of my life that I could say just what you did. I have a million excuses, and I'm too busy, and I don't have time to do all these things, and you're exhausted in doing this. And when you get older, I think, and maybe it's recognizing your mortality, and then you're seeing your kids get bigger and they're having kids, and you're putting things in perspective, and you have the time that I think it gets easier when you're realizing that 3/4 of your life is, even though it can go in any day, but when you're younger, it's not it doesn't seem real, not me, that type of thing. But I think when you get older, you do take that time, and you do reflect more, and you have had 1,000 different occurrences in your life where you've had no control. And I think it takes that time of not having any control where you say, I'm on my knees because I can't control this. And I think when you're 25 or 30 years old, maybe you haven't had that many times because you've been able to control most things, that all of a sudden when you get to be almost 60 like I am, we've had 100 times where you've been on your knees saying, Lord, I have no control. I have to give it all to you. And so maybe just that is part of the journey. Maybe that's how God got me to where I am now, is by going through those things. I don't know, but I was that person for 20 years, being able to say, well, I don't have time to go to daily mass. I don't have time to say a rosary. I don't have time to do this because I have too many other things to do. And so now you get to a point you're thinking, okay, it's real. It's real.
I am encouraged by some of the young families that we're exposed to, that some of the fathers are doing the men's groups and prayer time and cold plunges.
Yeah, yeah.
So I see that, and I'm very encouraged for the young men coming up the ranks. I think as mothers, when you have a baby growing inside of you, that rocks your world for the first time, wow, it is such a spiritual experience. And I hope it should be, as it should be, bringing a new human into a new soul. And it's an honor, a privilege. It's scary. It's all kinds of things, and you have to work through it. as a young mommy. But I think it's easier for women to embrace that, and I hope it is. I hope women have the time that they, to take the time as they're growing their first baby and all of their babies, but to come close to God and realize the importance of parenting that soul and the short time it is. Honestly, I always say once the child is 12 to 18 goes by so fast, and it's so formidable and so important for a springboard into adulthood. And that is a scary time. And that's one of those things that you have to say out loud when you get that voice comes up, or you're yelling or lecturing or doing whatever. And you go, oh, what's behind this is that I know my time is limited with this young person, and they're going out into the world, and I can't protect them forever. And I'm afraid, I'm lashing out because I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then what do you do with that when you recognize that fear? What's the next step?
Sometimes it's saying it out loud to the child and apologizing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually, just keep reminding yourself, like, why am I so anxious?
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Yeah. And if I can just add a spiritual thing is to say to God, God, I'm afraid. God hears my fear. God, I'm afraid. God hears my heart. I'm afraid. I'm afraid for this. I'm afraid for this, for my daughter, my son, my friend. I'm afraid. And that's real prayer. I know I have to go. Let me just put one bow on one thing. And it kind of ties all of this together. Sunday Mass, indispensable. Daily family dinner is indispensable. But it's not just the doing the things themselves, right? It's not just going to Mass and then and having dinner every night, because that by itself can be a recipe for that high expectation, low affection, which produces resentment. But it's like, no, the family dinner has to be a warm place, a warm and affectionate place, a safe place. Ken talked about this last time. The home and how Teresa provided that, the home being a safe place, a warm place. And so the family dinner being a place where like parents and children are looking forward to, and something that they can enjoy together. And so if there are things that are in the way of that, then it's not to say, well, let's forego family dinner. No, it's let's address the things that are the obstacles that are preventing the family dinner from being a warm and affectionate place. And I think doing this is what's going to lead into Sunday Mass being not only an indispensable, but something that children and parents look forward to every week. And then that feeds the family dinner, and then that feeds the Sunday Mass, right? So there's this relationship between the two. Agreed? Good, you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
God bless you.
God bless you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.